Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Lowepost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Conform series, and today we're talking aspect ratios. Now you might not think that aspect ratios are an important concept to understand, but trust me, they are. Whether we're talking about the aspect ratio of the timeline that you're going to be delivering to the client, or whether we're talking about the aspect ratios of the footage that you're going to be working with in your Conform, whether it is 8K, whether it's 4K, whether it's SD, whether it's archival footage, whether it's graphics that were sent to you, whether it's up converted, down converted, or cross converted footage, all of these different clips could conceivably have different aspect ratios, and you're going to need to know how to work with them inside of Resolve so that they look exactly the way that you need them to look. Now, in the first part of this lesson, I'm going to be utilizing After Effects strictly as a learning tool. You don't need to have any knowledge of After Effects. All I'm using it for is it's a very simple way for me to get in and show you different aspect ratios of potential timelines that you're going to be working with. Then what we're going to do is we're going to switch over into Resolve, and I'm going to show you real-world scenarios of working with mismatched aspect ratios so you can see how to get through these problems as easily as possible. All right, so let's Command or Tab into Adobe's After Effects. Now, what's advantageous to working in 4K, let's say you want to create a 4K master, is that the aspect is 16:9 or 1.78:1, which means that the UHD 4K 23976 deliverable matches the aspect ratio of the HD deliverable, meaning that if you were to finish the project in UHD and you were to put all your graphics, supers, and all that type of things in the 4K project, abiding by safe title, safe picture, etc., you can do a down convert to HD and everything will line up exactly the way that it needs to, so you don't actually need to create two completely separate masters and worry about getting in and adjusting images and things like that. Now, don't worry, we're going to get to that in just a second. Now, here's our HD raster dimensions here. Here's our 4K raster dimensions. They look identical, but as you can see, 1920 by 1080 versus 3840 by 2160. I did want to point out the 2K flat and scope. Now, these are for the digital cinema delivery. Now, I'm going to come back to the HD one just for 1 second to show you the slight difference between the HD, 1920 by 1080, and the 2K flat. You'll notice that because it is 1998 by 1080, we got a few more pixels on the left side and the right side, meaning you are going to have to give your image a slight bit of a zoom in if you're working with HD, or just make a slight adjustment on that 4K footage for a flat delivery. Now, the scope version is slightly different. You're going to notice that it's even a little bit wider on the left and right, a few more pixels at 2048. However, you'll notice a lot less pixels, almost 100, more than 100 less pixels at the top and the bottom for the scope aspect ratio. Okay? Now, this is going to come into play in just a second when we get into Resolve, and I'm going to show you how we're going to bring in footage, and we're then going to start making shifts to it inside of our frame. Okay? Now, what's important to keep in mind about digital cinema delivery is that if you've never done it before, I highly recommend that you hook up with a post-production facility that's done DCPs before. There's a lot of things that you need to know before doing it, and if one thing gets messed up along the way, most places will not accept a DCP that's not named correctly, delivered correctly, so you can run into a lot of problems. So just reach out to a post house that's done it before to get some guidance before you move ahead with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide out of After Effects, and let's Command or Tab into DaVinci Resolve. Now we are in the Edit module. Let's head on over to the Media Pool. And what we're going to do is navigate to the desktop. Now, I did something a little bit different for the clip that we're going to be working with. This was one of the clips that we had in 4K in a 16:9 aspect ratio. But what I did was I changed the aspect ratio. It is now a 4:3 aspect ratio to sort of simulate the situation you might be in the real world. Again, dealing with 8K, 6K, SD, archival footage. You sort of get where I'm going with this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to Command and Tab back into Resolve. Let's just double check to make sure that our project settings are set to be HD 1920 by 1080, 23976. And we're going to make sure that we actually take this clip and import it into our project before we start working with it. Now I'm going to come back to the edit module and let's open up the media pool and let's drag and drop this clip down into our timeline. Now, something has happened here, which Resolve might think is helpful, but it's not actually too helpful for me. Now you'll remember that I said this clip was 4K, so it's almost double the size of the current frame that we are working with. And it's also 4:3. Now the aspect ratio of my timeline is 16:9. Now Resolve knows that because the aspect ratios are different, that what it's going to do to best have this clip fill the frame is it's going to match its scale vertically and just let whatever happens horizontally happen, which in this case, it's pillar boxing it. Okay. Now, what most people think that they would do at this point is they're going to be going through every clip, they're going to be coming in, adjusting the zoom, or they'll be copying the attributes and pasting them onto all the other clips. We're not going to do any of that. Let me just undo what I just did here. What Resolve is doing is it thinks it's being helpful, but I'm just going to tell it how it can be a little bit more helpful for me. And what we're going to do is just come all the way down inside of the inspector, down to retime and scaling. Now, most people only look at this as being a retiming function, but it's the scaling function that we want to get at right now. I'm going to come over to scaling. You'll notice it's set to project settings, meaning it's looking at the aspect ratio of the project we're working with on how it's going to deal with footage that's being dropped in. Okay, let's take this and drop it down. If I come in and I select the first option of crop, you're going to notice that what's going to happen is that suddenly it's going to appear as though we've zoomed right into this image. Let's select crop. Boom, we're now right up here with this rock face. What we're actually looking at is the unscaled in version of this clip. So if I was to come back here, this is the 4K clip. So basically the clip is all the way out here, okay? And what people think that you would do is just come up and say, okay, well, let's now, zoom back and we'll just sort of get it to fill to about there. And now we can get in and make adjustments that we want. Or if I just undo that twice, let's come back down to our scaling. We'll set that to be crop. They can come on over here and they can turn on the transform widget and just make whatever adjustments they want to make with this zoomed in frame. Now I actually want to do neither. I'm just going to undo that for just a second to put it back the way that we had it before. And I'm going to come back over here to retime and scaling, because in this situation what I want to do is I want to come in and not have it fit the frame because that's what it was doing before. What I want to have it do is fill the frame, meaning that I'm telling Resolve, don't worry about having it be scaled down so that it fits perfectly vertically. I want you to make sure that it fills the frame how it needs to, which is horizontally. Now, on the flip side of this, if my clip was wider than high, it would make the proper adjustments as well so that this clip fits inside the frame. Now all we need to do is come in and make a simple Y adjustment to our clip to have it fit exactly the way that we need it to fit. Now keep in mind, if you were to come down and choose the last option of stretch, it's going to squash it down to have it fit inside of the raster dimension of the project that you are working on. Now I'm just going to set this back to be 0 so that you see how it's squashed inside the frame. Oh, gives me chills just looking at it. Let's set that back to fill. Perfect. Now, let me give you a worst case scenario of this when talking about dealing with a 2048 by 858 frame if you're going to be delivering in 2K scope. Let me just quickly come up to File. I'm going to come down to the project settings. I'm just going to switch our timeline resolution. I'm not going to worry about the frame rate. I'm going to switch it to 2048 by 858 DCI scope 239, and I'm going to say save. Now you see where this really comes into play. We're still set to fill. I'm just going to come back up here. And now, not scale, we want to adjust the Y position. You see that based on the frame size and the aspect ratio that you're working with, you get a very different image. Now we're only dealing with the water, or we're only dealing with the mountains, as opposed to what we were working with before inside of our project settings when we had everything set to HD and we had a lot better view of the river and the mountains at the same time. So let's talk about how this is going to work in a conform scenario. I'm going to navigate to the media pool. We're going to delete that timeline and the clip that goes along with it, and we are going to navigate to Media 1, to our footage, to our 4K footage folder. I'm going to select all this media and drag it and drop it into my project. Now what's important to keep in mind is that this footage is 4K, but it's the original 4K media, meaning that it is 3840 by 2160 at an aspect ratio of 16:9. If we were to create an HD timeline, take all this footage, drop it in, it will all be downscaled automatically correctly by Resolve. So let's throw the proverbial monkey wrench into things just a little bit. Let's navigate to File. We're going to come down to Project Settings. And we're going to change the aspect ratio of this project to be a flat project. So of course now what's going to happen is when this footage is downscaled, it will fit properly vertically. However, it will not fit properly horizontally and will get a very, very slight pillar boxing on the left and right side of the screen. So let's go about doing this. I'm going to head back to the edit module. Let's just call it the media pool. I'm going to select all my media. We're going to drag it and drop it into our timeline. And you'll see there is our little bit of pillar boxing. So of course, what we're going to do is we're going to select, we'll just select the first clip. I'm going to come down to our retime and scaling. We'll just switch that to be a fill, looking very nice. Now, what most people think that they would do at this point is they would select this, copy it, and paste the attributes. However, to be honest, unless you've shot everything at 4K in the same aspect ratio, you're going to be going through and doing this on a clip-by-clip basis. So all we're going to do is just zoom back just a little bit. I'll just set this back to be the project settings for now, and I'm just going to hold Command or Control to select all of the clips that we'd like to change the scaling for all the way down to here, because keep in mind, maybe this is every other shot that you need to do this specific type of scaling adjustment for, and then with other shots you need to do a different type of scaling adjustment. So you're going to go through, hold Command or Control, select all the clips you want, come to scaling, come down to fill, and now you'll see that as I come through each shot fills the frame exactly the way that I need it to. So it's now the quote-unquote correct aspect ratio. However, if we need to make any adjustments to any of these shots, we can always select them, navigate back up to Transform, and make those Y adjustments with the little bit of picture that we have outside of the frame. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowepost.com/forum.